Welcome to another episode of CrossTalk. I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes. My name is Kevin Tocci, and we have a fantastic show planned for you. This gentleman who is here with me, you might recognize him from a previous show that we had. He is seeking your vote. I would think so, more so at the upcoming convention, but also for governor in September and November. We have Mr. Joe Avellone, who's joining us, and he's here to talk with us not so much about his campaign for governor, but one of the elements in his campaign in regards to the ongoing epidemic on the South Shore in the state, and that is with drug addiction. Mr. Avellone.
Kevin, great to be with you. Thank you.
Welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Thank you.
First and foremost, for folks who may not have seen the first show enough, just give a little bit of an overview as to yourself and your campaign for governor.
Thank you. Well, I come from a healthcare background, Kevin. I'm a surgeon and really spent my career in the health industry. I was the COO of Blue Cross back in the 90s after practicing surgery for some time. But for the last 7 years, I've been running a very large global division of an international medical research company. It's called PowerExcel, and we have 15,000 employees around the world in 50 countries. So I've run a very large global operation, and I understand a lot of things about what we need to face going forward in the Commonwealth. New jobs, clearly, based on new job skills, improving our poorer performing schools. And frankly, substance abuse. I've really, since I started the campaign a year ago, been running into this issue all around the state. And this has really become, I think, a significant issue for us, and certainly would be in my administration should I be elected.
What are you hearing most from folks who are out there who are shaking your hands and bending your ear in regards to the drug problem that we have here in the state?
Well, it's really how much addiction affects so many families. Yep. And I mean addiction including alcohol, but certainly in recent years, the huge increase in prescription drug misuse and overuse leading quickly to addiction, and then tragically leading to heroin addiction. And this does seem to be the pattern, and it's affecting so many young people. And the reason I think this is something that the state has to be very aggressive in how it deals with is it ruins so many young lives. I mean, young kids are finding access to these very powerful oral narcotic drugs at parties, effectively. And within weeks, literally weeks, can become very addicted. And at that point, their whole lives change. So there's a whole series of things that would have to change to make sure that we can protect that from happening, but we have to do it. Right now, it's affecting way, way too many good families with otherwise good children who are kind of falling into this trap. And this is something I think the state has to really take a much more active role in preventing.
What do we have to do as a state? What would your administration have to do in order to combat this? Is it more or less, is it further education? Is it a matter of holding doctors more, to task in regards to, when they're giving up? What is it that we're going to need to do in order to begin tackling this issue?
Well, it's a lot of things, and that's why I think it has to be a very high priority for the governor. And in my case, I'm promoting the idea of an office of recovery that's high in the Health and Human Services in the governor's office. And it needs to do many things, almost turn the whole way we do things on their head. Right now, the way it works today, many young people with minor drug offenses end up in county jails. We have about 12,000 inmates in county jails around the state. So not our permanent houses of correction, but the county jails. They're in there, people are in there on average a year. And about 75 or 80% of people in those facilities have drug-related crimes, often due to their own addiction, and they're not getting appropriate treatment. So we've approached this as a criminal justice issue, in a way, kind of fallen into that. And as a consequence, we're not serving these young people level. They don't really belong there in the first place. They're not getting the treatment that they really need. So we need to start thinking of this as a real health issue, not a criminal justice issue. And we need to then change a lot of things in our state. First of all, we don't have near enough capacity to deal with the problem. We don't have near enough detox beds. We don't have near enough rehabilitation facilities, which would be the next stage of treatment. We don't have enough sober houses. So we have to make sure as a state that we build up the capacity to take care of the problem that we truly have. And then we also have to change some other things in order to even bring people to treatment. We don't have the insurance rules that our insurance companies have are really not very conducive to really getting people cured. We have to recognize this is a health issue and that certain kinds of treatment is necessary, but the insurance companies too often put lots of roadblocks in for repeated authorizations, and that means that people fall back into, young people fall back into the system because they can't go from detox to rehab, and then they fall back into their addiction cycle. So that really has to change as well. Also, we need more drug courts. Right now we have about 21 so-called drug courts. So these are courts that really take on the issues of young people coming into the system, and instead of putting them in the county jail, essentially manage and oversee their treatment, almost like a probation would do. We have about 21 of those in the state. We need at least 50. We need to make sure we have those in every jurisdiction in our state and that they all operate at the appropriate level. So there's a whole variety of things. That's why I think we almost need to just almost change everything about how we're treating with this, because I don't think we're doing it successfully right now.
I have to ask you, is you and I had a conversation before the cameras began rolling, before the show started, and one of the things that we had talked about is recovery high schools.
Yeah.
It was just recent. It was just a couple of years ago that Brockton, some of the folks in the city of Brockton, led an effort to create a fourth recovery high school. Recovery high school basically is a place for someone who is an addict, but yet is willing to do what they have to in order to stay clean and sober, and go to an environment where the people around them understand what's going on, and basically they can kind of work and cope together. Is that something that you think that also that we maybe we need more recovery high schools to help those who want a second chance and want to continue their education?
Absolutely. I think recovery is a long and difficult process, and certainly being in an environment that fosters it instead of pulling you back into the addiction that you've had is critical. And so for these young people that are in high school, having faced the problem of their addiction, they now need to stay in an environment, many of them, where they can recover with peers and keep themselves strong effectively to be able to succeed. So I think recovery high schools are a good idea. I know there is one in Brockton. I think that's wonderful.
Right.
We probably do need more around the state. But there are other things that I think we need to do in addition. But a lot of it has to do with changing the stigma of addiction. Right now, I think part of why we don't treat this correctly as a state is we don't really think of it really as a health issue. It is a health issue. We still think of it with a prejudiced kind of old views that previous generations have had, and maybe we've had, where there must be something wrong, it must be a moral failing, maybe it was a failure of parenting. None of that is true. Yeah. Certainly today, we can see lots of wonderful young people almost before they know it getting addicted and then into this circumstance. And it doesn't have anything to do with a moral failing. It has everything to do with the fact this is a health problem and we need to solve it.
How about as far as education when it comes to parents? Do you have a particular philosophy? I know certain communities that have certain programs that they put forth, and they try to educate parents of just before middle school, maybe 5th or 6th grade. Is that something that maybe you would hope your administration would kind of put funding into, having this education to get the parents who have children to understand that drug addiction does not discriminate, that it knows it doesn't pick out a certain culture, but that anybody can be affected.
Absolutely, and I think witness the fact that a lot of the young people that are being affected when they're 13, 14, 15 years old. So I think, once again, if we recognize it as a health problem, then we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. Families shouldn't be afraid to talk about it, and schools and school systems shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. So I think this is a key part of it. And so education broadly to destigmatize it, but also intently on kind of very impressionable age groups in our schools and the families themselves is an important part of this as well. So there is some basic public health aspects like the mass education that certainly have to be part of this in addition to what I've said before.
Okay. Well, that just is a little bit of an addendum. How about as far as for families that are dealing with a family member who is recovering? maybe additional funding or assistance for organizations like Learn to Cope.
Yeah.
Which is a phenomenal if you're somebody who gets blindsided by by this, that you find out that your son or daughter is addicted. You're like, what do I do?
Yeah, first of all, Learn to Cope is just a wonderful organization, and the leadership, Joanne Peterson and Bridget Van Essen, they're incredible people that over a 10-year period have just found this problem and then gathered other people. They have maybe 5,000 people around the state that gather in weekly support groups now, either to help new parents, often parents coming in, or even just to support some of the people that have been there longer. This is an incredible thing that it shows the real need of people to have a shared understanding and to band together. I think one of the things that will also be in my Office of Recovery is, if you go to those meetings, and I have gone, is that they don't know where to turn. When they're first confronted with addiction, it's very hard to figure out where to get treatment. And this shouldn't be. We don't have trouble trying to figure out where to get treatment if somebody has diabetes. So in my Office of Recovery, we're going to have a whole series of regional coordination points where it's known in the community that there's one number to call and you can get into treatment right away. That's what we have to have, enough capacity and enough of these regional coordinators so that everybody in the state knows where to go to get treatment. We all know that when somebody is finally hit that time, when they can turn their lives around, or when the parents and them together can turn their lives around, they have to get into treatment right away or the moment is lost. And that is a problem in our state right now. So regional recovery centers, and I hope to have these centers with people who've been in recovery that are actually helping to find now people suffering get into treatment right away.
Talk to me about any stories that you've heard while you've been out on the road. I'm sure somebody has come up to you with a story about a family member who is, with the grips, dealing with the grips of drug addiction. Anything that comes to mind that you could share?
Well, so many stories. I think two things come to mind that just shows how this really can trap people. First of all, I've heard many times of young people who are good athletes in high school who get sports injuries.
Yep.
Then they end up at the doctor's office and get prescribed OxyContin or Vicodin, and within weeks are hooked. So starting out with a sports injury, not even experimenting at a party, which also happens. So I think these are tragic stories that show the power of this addiction. The other is how quickly people go on to heroin. Young people don't have the history of the idea of what heroin was that many of us do from 20 or 30 years ago. It's much cheaper. We have so much heroin on our streets that after a while they can't afford the drugs, which now they're trying to buy or even steal to get at $30 a pill because now they're addicted. And heroin is something like $7. So they quickly find their way to heroin because it's cheaper. And then, of course, that exposes them to all the other ills of heroin. And if they're using needles, then all the other diseases that go along with that. So this is a terrible downhill spiral that starts out rather innocently. That's why I think it's so dangerous.
Any thoughts of seeking federal assistance in order to combat this, whether it's additional police training or police officers? Because once somebody's addicted, you see what happens. We see spikes in crime because usually the addict has to find a way to finance their addiction. And while folks may be like, well, he's a crook, no. They have to understand is the
That's
drug
what's driving their behavior. Yeah.
Right, that basically the drug seeking that, chasing that high,
Yeah.
that they have to find a way to finance it, so they go into, stealing, and before you know it, it gets even worse. Where they'll hold up a place to be able to get enough money, or get drugs from a CVS.
But there's no question that a lot of crime is related to this, and if we can get to the root cause, which is the addiction, the crime would go down. And there's also no question that the healthcare costs overall in the system go down, because since we're treating this inadequately, either by putting these people in our county jails or inappropriately not giving them enough treatment in the right way, they fall back into addiction. They end up back in the emergency room. They end up with all kinds of other health problems. So the cost to us overall of overusing jails, having more crime than we would, and having more health costs than we would, essentially would pay for all the treatment that we actually need. This actually pays for himself if we were just doing it right. I do think, you mentioned the government though, we do have to do more with the federal government. And as a governor, I would pull the leaders of the other 6 states together in the region. And together with our congressional delegation, I'd push hard on the FDA. I think the FDA needs to increase its safety profile for approving new kinds of oral narcotics like this, because they've proven to be so easy to divert and so quickly addicting.
Like Zohydro?
Like Zohydro. So Zohydro is an example of another new powerful drug that has been approved by the FDA, even against its own advisory committee, and is now in the market, but has the potential, because it isn't tamper-proof, to be even more addicting than what we have out. So I think the governor was correct to put a ban on that right now until we can assure ourselves that we have protections in place from using that drug, either how it gets used or keep a ban until we have a safer version of it. Because we don't need to add fuel to the fire we've already got going here. I do think that we can have some success with the FDA if we, 6 governors, 12 senators and 21 congressmen can make a difference for something like this. And then finally, the doctors. I mean, I'm a doctor, but it's clear that there's way too much prescribing going on. It may be unwittingly, because people are dealing with what they perceive are pain problems, but we need a significant re-education of our doctors around pain control, because whatever we think we're doing right now, it's not working. There's way too much drug available that's sitting in medicine cabinets unused and available for misuse.
Do me a favor, talk to me about, I know you did an op-ed piece not too long ago with Stephen Tolman, who was kind of big on this whole area of drug addiction. Kind of talk about that for a moment, will you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Steve, as you know, is the president of the AFL-CIO, wonderful person, a great leader. He was a state senator before that, and he's had a long-term interest in this. And part of it's personal in his family, and frankly in my family. We both have siblings who are dealing with children who have addiction problems, and so once again, it's very, very common in lots of families. So he and I are very like-minded that we need to do this something radically different, and that's why we wrote this editorial together and op-ed piece together, and I think it's getting a very good reading. So I think people are recognizing that we're at a tipping point. We have to do something very different, and certainly if I get elected, we will be doing something very different.
Talk to me about Narcan. It's something that I know that communities are more and more, not only with their paramedics, but are looking to their firefighters and other first responders like police, arming them with it. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, it's a lifesaver. It does absolutely work. It actually reverses the effects of all opioids very quickly. And so the real problem is people stop breathing, and if they're in overdose. But Narcan will quickly reverse that. And so this has to be, given our circumstances, has to be much more widely available for first responders. And I think the governor did the right thing the other day in having making that possible. So I do expect that there'll be more training. It's very easy relatively easy to use. You know, there's a nasal spray that is one way to administer it, and there'll be another new kind of injectable form that I think is also going to be cheaper and much more available for use in emergency situations. So people who are first responders, or even people who are families of people who are addicted, I think should have access to Narcan. There's no real downside, and the potential for saving a life is absolutely there. It happens all the time. And unfortunately, it's had to be used many times already this year in our state, and it has saved many lives.
I guess I would ask you is, again, the governor that's currently sitting is trying to be proactive with the Narcan. You've already mentioned kind of having some kind of a regional outreach to try to combat this. I know that the state of Massachusetts has worked very hard to make sure that there's no doctor shopping, and that there's no tampering with a script if someone is given a prescription. Is this something, as a governor, that maybe you might speak with other neighboring states to see if, in fact, they are kind of, in the same realm of making sure that they have the same thing on the books?
Yeah. So I think historically Massachusetts, in more normal circumstances, has been a leader in trying to deal with substance abuse. Once again, we're a leader in a lot of things, healthcare generally, but we're in extraordinary times. And I don't think we've kept up with the magnitude of the prescription drug misuse and leading to heroin. And that's why we have to do things very differently. And I think that's why we really have to change things as aggressively as I'm suggesting. But I don't think we're the only state affected. So I think pulling together as a region, there's a few things that we could really do. One is, I think we can push on the FDA. The second is, I do think that we can work harder on the smuggling of heroin into our states, respectively, if we work together. I also think there's some best practices and the ability to even share facilities with the peaks and valleys of the need, since I think capacity for treatment is going to be an issue if we do this right.
Would this be, you talking about smuggling heroin into the state, would you hope that maybe our government, the federal government, would renew its war on drugs, at least in regards to heroin?
You know, I hesitate to say that the war on drugs has been that successful. I do think it's more of trying to clamp down on our borders to try and stop the smuggling patterns that I'm sure as a group of 6 states we can understand. It's on the highways and in our ports, and I think I would focus it on the region as opposed to asking the government to take on their role, which is really for the whole country.
I have to ask you, any worries? You've watched what's happened in a couple of other states, like Colorado, I think Washington State, where they've legalized marijuana. This state, the voters have slowly worked towards, decriminalizing marijuana. If you have a certain amount of marijuana, to now folks can have medical marijuana. I've heard district attorneys who have said that this is a slow, a descent to legalizing marijuana.
Yeah.
Any worries of legalizing marijuana, which has been called a gateway drug?
Well, yes, I'm not ready to go there. What I would say is we ought to have we ought to strictly implement the medical marijuana law that we now have on the books. Right. And I mean strictly meaning we should make sure that we write the rules such that it's only available for the medical conditions that we know absolutely have scientific proof that they work. And leave it at that. And I think we have 2 other states, Washington and Colorado, which are now have legalized it for recreational use. Let's see what happens with them for 5 years. I don't see why we have to be a leader there. I think we can get the benefits of medical marijuana where we know it works. Some of the other states that have medical marijuana laws have very loose requirements on what it's good for, what it's not good for. It's kind of a backdoor way to have recreational use. I'm not really ready to go there. I don't think we need that. I think we're going to learn a lot about the real ramifications of this from these other states.
I think where I was kind of going with that is the worry of legalizing marijuana. Again, this was something that the voters in Massachusetts have slowly worked, at the polls at, and where we're trying to battle something like, heroin, drug addiction. If this is something that could be a potential setback for whoever may be the governor, this coming term or the following term down the road.
Well, I don't know that it obviously doesn't have the same addictive potential, so I'm not really ready to sort of track the science towards the heavy addiction of these other things. But I don't see any reason why we should be entertaining recreational marijuana now. And we do have a huge problem dealing with the prescription drug and heroin epidemic that we do have now.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't talked about during this conversation that's very pertinent that you talk about while we have you in front of the cameras?
Well, I think it's great that we're talking a lot more about this issue. Certainly some mayors have really stepped up and taken the lead in dealing with this in their towns. Certainly Mayor Hoy in Taunton is one, and I think the mayor in Brockton and some other places. And even Mayor Walsh in Boston has talked about recovery as an issue and addiction issues in Boston. So I'm glad that we're having a much more open conversation. I think it is important to do that. So as governor, I think it's important for the next governor to take the lead in really trying to remove the stigma of this. And I certainly would do that if I'm elected.
Okay. We get about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in regards to your candidacy for governor, and that you would want to do in regards to the problem with drug addiction and dealing with that issue?
Well, one of the things is that this is an issue it's easy to come and go. It's easy for people to put it back in a box. If unfortunately what has really gotten it in the open is the fact that we've had these overdose deaths, and they're tragic. But it's really just the tip of a very large iceberg, as I was saying. I was seeing this all over all last year as I was campaigning. I didn't really start out my run for governor thinking that this was going to be a signature issue, but it really is a very large issue, and we have to deal with it. And some of my awakening really happened on the South Shore. I heard about it all over the state. I'll be very quick to say. But actually in some Democratic Town Committee meetings on the South Shore is when I really was sitting at tables talking to people, and they started to openly talk about it. So my awakening really happened to some degree on the South Shore, although I've certainly seen this all over. I think my candidacy is really focused on how to support and grow the middle class. That's, I think, the key to making the Commonwealth better, bringing more people into the middle class, and supporting the middle class who's under siege with issues of job availability and protection and education issues. So for me, it's new jobs based on new job skills. It's essentially improving the poorer performing schools, because we have some very good ones, including in Brockton, but the poorer performing schools. And it's dealing with addiction. This addiction issue is sapping our strength and our young people, and I think we have to deal with that as well. I have a healthcare background, and I know healthcare costs are a big issue, and I know that we need to control those as well. It's hard on our public budgets. It's also hard on our families and our businesses. I can do that. I have a kind of a lifetime of career as a health manager, and I know that I can deal with these issues that are health related for our Commonwealth.
We get about 3 minutes left. Okay. If you had an opportunity to say anything to the folks, look into the camera and say anything to them, whether you want to talk about the conversation that we're just about to complete, or anything in regards to your candidacy for governor, feel free to at least speak to the folks who are viewing this program.
Thanks, Ken. Well, first of all, I would say I hope that all of you who are participating in the democratic process will feel good about the fact that we have 5 candidates. I'm one of 5. We do have a convention coming in June, so if you're a delegate, first of all, I would very much appreciate your support. We have a lot of delegates who haven't committed yet. I believe that I can help support and grow our middle class, and if that resonates with you, I would absolutely love to have your support at the convention. All of us need 15% of the delegates. I think I've got a very good jump on that, because I've got good strength in cities like Worcester and Quincy and Brockton and Taunton. I have many mayors and city councilors that have endorsed me, including Jay Stewart here in Brockton. So I'm hoping that if you're a delegate and you go to the convention, you would support me. And then for the broader population, if you're Democrats and you're going to vote in the primary in September, I absolutely humbly ask for your support. If you want to know more about my campaign, you can go to my website at avelloneforgovernor.com, or our Facebook page, which is Avellone for Governor Facebook. I look forward to meeting many more of you as the campaign goes forward.
I want to thank you for coming back in
Thanks so much, Kevin.
A second time, and at least talking about an issue like this, which has been it's been on the front page of the papers every other day, whether it's somebody who is caught up in a crime because of addiction, or just because of overdose deaths. So we definitely thank you for coming in and being part of the program.
It's my pleasure. I look forward to the day when we're treating this differently and much more effectively.
Make sure you check out his website, and thank you very much for viewing CrossTalk with, of course, Joe Avellone, who's with us this time. That's another one. Have yourself a great day.